Let's face it, a lot of men would put up with a woman with a temper if she looked like Elizabeth Taylor. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I'm continuing my masculine feminine energies film breakdown series with the Shakespeare classic Taming of the Shrew. If you're not familiar with what I mean by masculine and feminine energies, I talk about this in most of my videos, but a brief summary. Masculine and feminine energies are energies that live within all of us. We all contain both energies. We all have a core energy that's the one we're most ourselves in. We can be in wounded or healed versions of either of these energies, and these energies often link up with our gender. They don't have to, but they very often do. Each of these energies contains archetypes, and we all contain all of the archetypes, and we can tap into them whenever we need to. I have tons of videos about the masculine and the feminine archetypes. And in order to have sexual polarity in a relationship, you need one partner to be in the masculine and one partner to be in the feminine, because opposite energies attract sexually and same energies repel sexually. So today we're looking at Taming of the Shrew, which is a 1967 adaptation of Shakespeare's classic Taming of the Shrew. This movie stars Elizabeth Taylor and her real-life love and two-time husband, Richard Burton. And fun fact for those of you that don't know, Taming of the Shrew was actually the inspiration for the movie 10 Things I Hate About You. And this movie also really reminds me a lot of The Quiet Man, which I have a breakdown of on this channel. It's one of my favorite breakdowns, so I encourage you to check that out. So I realize Shakespeare is not for everyone, but this was actually a requested film, and I love the story behind this request. The woman who requested it told me that she actually read this in high school, and they actually watched the movie while she was in class, and that she had like this middle-aged female teacher, and all of the like 16-year-old girls in class all wanted Catherine and Petruchio to end up together, and the middle-aged teacher in the class was like mortified that the teenage girls were not repulsed by him. So I want to get into that because I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic. So keep in mind that Taming of the Shrew was written by Shakespeare in a totally different time period. So I am not at all implying that the relationships in this movie are ones to aspire to, but I do think that there is some basis for the masculine and feminine and the sexual polarity that is very evident in this very extreme case, and I want to break that down. The basic premise is that Catherine, played by Elizabeth Taylor, is the older sister, and her younger sister Bianca is the fair maiden of the town. Everybody in this town loves Bianca. They're so taken with her, and Bianca really is the epitome of the light feminine energy. She's just so sweet and ethereal. She's blonde. Catherine has that, like, you know, dark Elizabeth Taylor, dark raven black hair. That's obviously to show that Catherine is much more of the dark feminine. She's very fiery. She's very passionate. She's got a temper. She's not afraid to show that anger. So these two sisters are complete opposites, and everybody is terrified of Catherine, and all the men in the town are in love with Bianca. But it was very customary in those days for the father to not allow his younger daughter to get married until he married off his older daughter. Basically, until they could find a suitable husband for Catherine, Bianca was not allowed to get married. And everybody thought that was an impossible task until Petruchio comes into town. So Petruchio decides he is going to woo Catherine and make her his bride. And I'm not at all implying throughout any of this video that their relationship is one to model yourself after, right? I mean, it's pretty chaotic, and Petruchio's got a lot of wounding, but I do think this movie is a great example of dark feminine energy, and I'm gonna do a whole video just about dark feminine energy because I really do think that it deserves its own video. I'm not gonna dive too much into that, but I do think that Catherine is the epitome of dark feminine energy. She is not afraid to use her voice. She is not afraid to speak her truth, and she's literally a walking example of feminine testing. I have a lot of videos about feminine testing on here. She's not going to submit and surrender to a man who is not strong enough to handle her, and she will not settle for less. And she really, in this town, is really surrounded by pretty weak men. I mean, these men are not very manly. They're not able to stand up to her. They're not able to handle all of her. And you could very easily argue that our society in general puts the light feminine, the Biancas, the sweetness, that feminine has been really elevated and put up on this pedestal as being the ultimate, and the dark feminine has been really pushed aside because men's egos don't like the dark feminine, point blank period. Men's egos can only handle light feminine. However, the dark feminine is what challenges a man to step up and be his strongest. And I would very easily argue that the fact that in our society that we focus so much on the light feminine And men have not been exposed to enough of the dark feminine. And I'm not talking about women's triggers, traumas, wounding, women's masculine shield. I'm not talking about that, but like women's dark feminine energy, her dark feminine storm, that most men are not prepared to handle that. They're just not. But it's that dark feminine energy that women bring out that actually, it challenges men to step up and be stronger. And you see that so much in the dynamic, particularly in their first interaction, which is a pretty long interaction, where Petruchio is basically chasing Catherine around. She's basically like fighting him the whole time. It's really this idea that she's not going to surrender to him until he can prove he can handle her. And I don't know if she's necessarily consciously saying that, but it definitely is. It's this, hey, this is my storm. I have all this anger. I have all these feelings. I have all this emotion. And I want a man who can handle all of my storm. And he is actually kind of entertained by it. The other men in the town are all terrified of her. And a woman is never going to be able to respect and surrender to a man who can't handle the fullness of her storm. She can't. I mean, because she's not going to trust him. Whereas the fact that Petruchio is so, as frustrated as he gets sometimes, he kind of thinks it's playful. Like, he kind of has fun with it. And I actually think that that's a really interesting aspect of the dance when it comes to the masculine and the feminine. Is people think a lot that, okay, well, the masculine is the leader, he's the king, and he absolutely can be. And the feminine is this like regal queen. There's a coolness about her. And that's definitely a part of masculine feminine dynamics. But the passion, the polarity can also come from the feminine just being chaotic, from being wild, from being in her emotions. It's not just her being happy and playful. Sometimes she's going to be sad and sorrow and crying, and that can be beautiful too. It's sometimes she's going to be angry. She's going to be angry and frustrated and fiery, and she wants a masculine man who can handle that, because if he can't handle her and her emotions, first of all, I mean, how is he going to protect her from other people who actually want to harm her? A lot of this is her really trying to find a man who is strong enough to handle her. And their dynamic together, I mean, she is so beautiful the way she tortures him. I gotta say, I mean, yeah, she's Elizabeth Taylor, so she's gorgeous, obviously. But the fact that she's having so much fun with it, I mean, she's got a lot of anger, but it's playful anger. Like, she's making it playful and fun. And, you know, it's like she kind of feels like she's defeated him, and it's kind of this like, like she's like so happy with herself, and it's playful. And then he kind of makes a comeback, and he kind of tries to get her, and it's like he's kind of being playful too. And this kind of playful back and forth that they have, it's very flirtatious. And I actually think that, well, I'm not encouraging couples to actually do the things that they're doing, because some of the things that they were doing are pretty dangerous. If a masculine man can actually see a woman in her anger, in her rage, in her sorrow, in her, like, in those kind of like dark feminine parts, those shadow aspects to her, and he can find them a turn on, that's sexy. Like, that is polarity right there. Like, and that's not something everybody's necessarily ready for. And I think sometimes as couples, you might need to ease yourself into it, like not just all of a sudden start fighting each other. And if you can start playing in that polarity as a feminine being, actually having fun with your darkness, having fun with your chaos, having fun with your emotions that might not be so pretty, and actually finding pleasure in those. And if a masculine man can actually find the pleasure and the turn on in the feminine's dark sides, her shadow aspects, the sides of her that aren't quite so pretty and perfect and polished, like, that's a recipe for like some really steamy sexual polarity right there. Now, Petruchio is not perfect, mind you. He's got some addiction issues, he's got some temper issues and things like that. And if you notice that when they got married, their wedding scene, he shows up drunk and is essentially very erratic. He's very unstable. Catherine shuts down to him. Like, she was open. Yeah, she was angry, she was frustrated, but she was much more playful in that anger and in that rage. Whereas when he got drunk and started to get really unstable, she went along with the wedding ceremony, but she was very shut down. Like, her heart was shut down. Like, she got really quiet. Normally, her normal self is anger, it's emotion, it's showing her emotions, it's expressing her feelings. But during that wedding scene, when he got very unstable and erratic, she really shut down. And that's really her putting up her masculine shield. She's putting up a protective shield. She didn't feel safe to be her full self because he was unstable and erratic. I think that that's really significant, because I don't think that enough men realize that if you are not the grounded stability, your partner has to be the grounded stability. Somebody has to be the stable ground, or else everyone's just gonna fall, right? Somebody has to be. So if you as a man, and I'm not saying that men can't, you know, have a drink, or, you know, that men can't sometimes be a little bit erratic or unstable, like, we're human. Or if you are the masculine in the relationship and you want your partner to relax and surrender into her feminine, whether it be your light feminine or dark feminine, anything like that, if you become unstable, she's gonna become the stability. So if you as a man have a feminine partner who is not relaxing, she's not surrendering, she's not open, and she's not flowing, and you're not finding that polarity, I want to take a look at yourself and see how stable you are being, because in reality, the masculine in the relationship, which is most of the time going to be the man, is going to operate the best as the rock, as the stability. The feminine in the relationship is going to operate her best when she is in flow, when she is moving and flowing, whether it be the pretty light emotions or whether it be the darker, more intense, less pretty emotions, like all those things. The feminine is going to operate better in that energy, and that's going to create the sexual polarity. Very often when the man becomes unstable for whatever reason, whether it be an addiction or whether it be just he's lost his direction, the feminine will have to step in and be that grounded stability. She's capable of that, but she's not going to be her best self. So neither of you are going to be operating at your best self, and you're not going to be in your natural core energy. So likely that sexual polarity is going to just disappear. And those are the couples that are like, hey, why are we just roommates, or why are we not attracted to each other anymore? That's usually what happens. So Catherine and Petruchio do not exactly have the model relationship. They're back and forth. There's a lot of battle. There is this sense, I mean, the title, Taming of the Shrew, that he's trying to tame her. I don't necessarily like that aspect, because I think actually it's that fiery passion that she has that's actually the turn on. The concept of trying to tame your partner in either side is not really something that I ascribe to, but I do think that there is something to the idea that the fact that Catherine sort of put him through so many tests, she knew his strength, so she trusted in his strength. So there's a really poignant final scene where basically Catherine and Petruchio have traveled back to her home because Bianca is getting married. Bianca has picked a suitor. So basically there is this bet. Petruchio and Bianca's husband and another one of the men in the town have this bet. And it's like, if they call for their wife, whose wife is going to come to them when they call for her? And everybody basically assumes that the other two wives, Bianca and the other wife, are going to be accommodating because they're the light feminine, they're very sweet, and they love their husbands and everything. And that Petruchio is the one whose wife is never going to listen to him and is basically probably going to rip his head off for even demanding that she come to him. And it's interesting how the other two wives basically blow them off. You know, Bianca doesn't really appreciate her husband because he really didn't do all that much to win her over. You know, they kind of fell in love and they had this romance, and Bianca had any guy she wanted and she picked this guy, but she doesn't really feel any obligation to him. And he really, they've just been in this romance. He hasn't really stepped up into his role as proving that he is a masculine protector and provider. This other man is kind of wimpy, you know, and his wife doesn't really feel any need or any responsibility to accommodate him in any way. Petruchio calls on his wife, and Catherine not only shows up, but she shows up with the other two wives and gives this whole speech about how these women should be respecting their husbands. And everybody's kind of floored, and Petruchio's even floored that his wife is honoring him in this way. And this is a different time period, so there is an aspect of submission to your husband that I think might be a little foreign to how we view marriages today and might make people a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm not necessarily saying that women should be bowing down and kissing their husband's feet or anything. This is a different time period. It's symbolic, and, you know, honestly, the nuances of what a traditional or submissive relationship is going to look like, I think varies from person to person, from relationship to relationship. It varies based on the time periods. I'm looking at the energies behind this. And the reason why Catherine is able to, in the end, submit to her husband is not really because he's trained her. I mean, that's what the movie kind of wants you to think. Like, well, he trained her so well, so he got her to submit and he tamed the shrew. In reality, it's because he proved his strength to her. He proved he could handle her, so she could submit to him. The other husbands have not proven themselves. They haven't proven themselves to anybody. They haven't actually shown that they are strong enough men to lead. So their wives aren't following them, and they're not following their lead because these men have not proven that they can handle anything, really. But because Catherine has tested his strength and she knows that he can handle her at her most chaotic, then she's comfortable submitting to him because she knows how strong he is. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of men don't understand is if you as a man cannot handle, I mean, it's kind of that like, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't get me at my best kind of thing. I mean, I do think people take that a toxic turn on that, but it's really a sense of like, if you can't handle a woman when she is fully in her chaos and she's fully in her chaotic feminine emotions, and I'm going to dive into this deeper. I'm not talking about traumas or triggers or like her taking out her anger at somebody else onto you. I'm talking about her full sense of feminine emotions. If you as a man can't handle that, she's not going to be able to relax and surrender to you because you haven't shown that you were strong enough to handle her. And that's a really important distinction. And I'm going to dive into the dark feminine much deeper because I really do think it deserves, I mean, it could deserve its whole like big online course, but I want to dive into it in a video to go much deeper about what I mean by the dark feminine. But I do have videos about feminine testing, and I have videos about women hitting men and fiery feminine and things like that. So I have some videos on that topic. It's really important that men understand, if you want to step into the masculine, you want to be the masculine in the relationship, to understand the feminine is not always going to be sweet and happy and love and light. She's going to have darkness. And in reality, most men are really turned on by that darkness. I think a lot of them fear it. A lot of men aren't used to it because we really do suppress the dark feminine nowadays. But a lot of men actually, well, they're gonna get turned on by it for one, because it can be really sexy. But also, it's the dark feminine that holds the men accountable. It's the dark feminine that actually inspires men to step up to greatness. It's the dark feminine that does a lot for the masculine, even though he may not be fully comfortable with it. If you want a woman to be able to submit to you, to surrender to your leadership, whatever way that you want to look at it, if you want a woman who's going to let go and let you be the leader, be the masculine leader, you're gonna need to show her that you can handle her dark feminine as well as her light feminine. And I don't necessarily think that this movie is a representation of like the healthiest relationship that we should be striving for, but there's aspects to it that I think are things we can learn from, like finding the playfulness in our anger, in our sorrow, and actually finding the turn on pleasure in that, in your partner and in yourself. And I think those things are really important. I think as a man, understanding that when a woman is in her chaos and her drama, as a man, it's your job to step up and be that stable rock. That's really important. You can't expect her to be able to relax and surrender with you if you haven't shown her that you are that stable rock. And I think that's really important for men and for women to understand. And that stuff is really, it's primal. It's very primal, and that's the reason why actually the lovely woman who requested this movie, why so many of the girls in her class when they were young found this dynamic to be sexy, is because, well, hey, teenage girls are really emotional, let's face it. And I think at any age, especially when women start coming into their hormones and actually start stepping into their natural cycles and things like that, we want a man that can handle all of us. And a lot of our society, again, we suppress women's emotions, we suppress women's menstrual cycles, we tell women they're crazy, we, you know, diagnose all these women with all these mental health issues just because they're emotional or things like that. And we don't let women fully embrace all these emotions. And if women don't learn to connect with all these emotions, then men don't know how to handle these emotions, and men then fear them, and you get a serious lack of polarity there. So I think it's evident that there's a primal thing in us as women. We want a man to be able to handle all of us, the good and the bad, the calmness and the storm. Like, we want men to be able to handle all of it. And as men, if you want to be in a really healthy and passionate relationship with a woman, being able to handle all of that stuff is so important, and actually learning yourself to be able to handle that is so important as well. This movie wasn't really necessarily about the individual scenes. It's Shakespeare. It's not necessarily going to be for everybody. But yeah, I loved the examples of the the passion and the play. And I think at the end, when you realize that the man who had proven himself to be strong enough was the one whose wife was willing to surrender to him, I think that those are just really important lessons, and I wanted to highlight those. So I'm going to go into much more detail about dark feminine energy in another video, so stay tuned for that. Be sure you subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Be sure you give it a big thumbs up, and be sure you subscribe. If you have any thoughts about this video or any other film requests, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I love to hear from you, and I love your suggestions. If you're interested in connecting to your feminine energy and learning about the art of feminine communication, I have online courses. They're listed in the description box below, so be sure you check those out, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.